Hi everyone. I've been away from this channel for several months. And not because I ran out of things to say, but because I wanted to come back with something very meaningful to this channel that's been probably in the media. And that's why I thought, let me take a break and reflect and collate everything that I'm doing and bring it back as one. So I am back. And over the past few months, I've been quietly building. I've been leading major programs, transformational programs. I've been developing some trauma informed frameworks, speaking about what is very important to me, psychological safety. Yep. Human behavior, and continuing to learn what it really means to help people heal, not just individually, but within families. And that, I must say, is not a walk in the park. So within families, organizations, and communities. And one thing has become a lot clear to me more than ever before, because this thing called healing, it's a lifelong lived journey. And so healing isn't only about recovering from our past. In fact, the very meaning of trauma is the not the event, but what the event leaves within us. And it's not just about you healing from your past, it's then becoming that kind of person who helps. This is where, for me, it all brings things together. And if you're of any spirituality or religious person, you know that this is what Jesus does. So it's becoming that kind of person who helps people create safer families. So this is like breaking the generational patterns, creating safer families at ground level, because before it becomes catastrophic. Safer organizations. Why? Because families, guess where they work? Organizations. And like in one of my LinkedIn posts, I say that it's not all those who have had trauma that become, I don't know, drug addicts, prostitutes, people who rely on government handouts. A lot, majority of people who have had traumatic events are living in a frozen functional mode. So in other words, they are in the organizations that you are in, that I am in. Because I was once one. I say was because yes, I have healed, but I'm still continuing to be that work in progress, albeit I'm more aware. So we need to be that person who helps create safer families, safer organizations, and safer communities. And that's why I am back. I stepped away intentionally, if I'm honest. I needed time to think, to build, to connect everything, all those things that I've learned through lived experience, like through neuroscience, psychology, and trauma informed practice. And years of walking and working alongside survivors, which I still do today, by the way. And some of that work has become new frameworks that I'm incredibly proud of and excited to share when I'm ready. I'm still developing quite a lot right now, and some of it I'm just not quite there yet to share, but when I am ready, I will share. And after a lifetime of having my voice taken from me, I've learnt that I only share when I choose to share. I don't get phased by algorithms or be pushed by, come on, post because people want to hear you. You've got to be ready and don't let anything push you, especially if you had your voice suppressed and repressed over the years. I say heal. So it's that strength, choosing to speak when you are ready, that is empowering, especially for many survivors of sexual abuse. Childhood sexual abuse is one of those silent killers that we don't often talk enough about. I'm grateful that today it's becoming more into the light where we are speaking about it and healing from it. Okay, so today I choose to speak because I am ready to speak. And many of you, I would say, you know part of my story. Hush to Raw, get your copy. Hush to Raw is my memoir of childhood, of my childhood when I experienced beautiful love, you know, but then suddenly traumatic events ensued, and then my healing. And that is why I'm here today and I'm able to say, I am ready to speak. So I want to explain why this work has become my life's calling. People call it passion. Now, passion can be misunderstood because though this is my passion, there are days that I cry and I feel, oh my word, it's a calling. Because passion to me is like, oh, I just want to keep doing it. I don't just want to keep doing it, but I can't not do it because it's a calling that gives me a lot of fulfillment. So let me just tell you something that I've not shared before. Okay. So growing up, my father was a highly respected man. He is in my book. I make no pretense. I don't shy away from it. I've spoken to him many years ago that my story is coming out. My siblings are aware of it. But when you heal and you come out with your story, you have to own it. And the truth is that what will set you free. So I digress. Growing up, my father was highly respected in a lot of communities. He held senior positions. At the time, he was in the HR department. At the time, it was called personnel, and he was the personnel director. He was admired by a lot of people. He occupied spaces that were of high esteem. From outside, everything appeared successful. He was a keynote speaker in universities. He would go onto the pulpit in churches. And he was very charismatic and very charming. He knew how to choose his words carefully. But behind closed doors, there were unresolved, if I may say, unresolved wounds that affected our family in profound ways. And that experience, it taught me something I have never forgotten. That unresolved trauma doesn't stay hidden. It doesn't stay silent. What does it do exactly? It influences every relationship you have, every communication you make with another person. Most devastatingly, the relationship that you have with yourself becomes fragmented. It becomes shame-ridden. It becomes a secret that eats you up. Yes, it really does. It influences the one thing that we have been blessed with, if you are fortunate to have been blessed with that very special gift, which is parenting. It influences our parenting. It influences our leadership. In other words, what I've said before, that there are three elements that we have come into the world to express. I believe in God. I have a relationship with God. And the image bearer that I am meant to be got fractured as a child. And those three elements that God said we should come and live out on earth are our voice, relationship, and power. Now, those three elements are what would position us as leaders. But guess what? When we experience trauma, something that shakes our life so much, all those things get eradicated. In other words, we don't occupy spaces that are for leaders, that ultimately means that at work you are positioning yourself to be suboptimal. I am not downplaying those who are doing the amazing work that keep us all happy and clean, but I'm just saying that if you are not living up to your greatest being, you need to think and actually look deeper into your childhood, because it influences our leadership role. It influences the decisions we make, the thoughts we have, the feelings we have. We personalize them so much, result into actions that are not what? That are not serving us. So in other words, what I'm saying is that unless those childhood wounds are recognized and addressed, they often continue affecting our everyday life. But what is even more devastating, because of what is known as epigenetics, it means that we can inadvertently pass on these environmental choices or other people's sins that have been on top of us. We can what? Create generational patterns if we don't what? Break the curse. I say break the curse, and it might seem very ancient, but it is existing today. We can call them patterns. I can call them patterns. I can use them interchangeably. Patterns, curses. We want blessings. It's all the way in the Bible until what happened? Jesus came to save us. But that does not mean that there's still not horrific things in the world today. And that's why I always say that if you want to be more or be at the level that God has placed you, we need to heal, not recover and go back, heal. And that means a daily vitamin of healing that restores our voice, our power, and our relationship to others, but most importantly, to ourselves. So, that understanding that I knew back then shaped both my personal healing and my professional work, because what? One bleeds into the other. When your personal life is not going well, there's no how that it will not bleed into your professional life. It might be that you shut down when people speak to you. It might be that you can't stand up for yourself at work. It might be that you are the perpetrator at work because you are so weak. You feel that power means you having a power preserving posture and being what? A bully. Yes. I'm sorry to say that if that's you, but I am not sorry. You need to heal. So today, whether I'm speaking to survivors, professionals, or leaders, I'm always asking that same question. How do we recognize trauma early enough to prevent more harm? How do we recognize trauma early enough to prevent more harm? So while I've been away, there have been important conversations about safeguarding and child protections that have been growing through the nation in the UK. In other words, laws that have been placed into our system. And that has given me a lot of hope. For survivors, those conversations can bring emotions all at once. And I must admit, when I read those legislations, it brought relief, it brought grief, and it brought hope. It also, I dare say, brought anger. And some of us quietly wonder, what might my childhood, your childhood, have been if these legislations were put in place sooner than they are now being implemented? And if I'm honest, that's a deeply human question. There is no sin. There's nothing wrong in asking these questions. It's getting past that question that really matters. Why? Because we can't change the past. But together, yep, we can now help shape a safer future for the upcoming generations and making aware those people who still hold strong, horrific beliefs that they need to be what? Perpetrators. We need to break their cycle and speak up. Because something that I often say a lot is evil strives when good people say nothing. So people might say, I'm just staying in my corner, I am being quiet. Let me tell you this. Your being silent is just as dangerous as those who are saying something bad. Because you can't just sit silent. That is inaction, which is causing harm to children. So on the question or on that topic of children, in recent months, I was deeply affected by the reports of children and teachers that were kidnapped in Oyo State, Nigeria. But today, as this recording is going on, I can gladly say that those children and the teachers that were left have been released. Now, that brought immense joy, gratitude to me, because I was thinking beyond their abduction. I was thinking that, oh my word, apart from the most horrific thing that could happen to them, where that would mean they won't come back to us, I was thinking that when they get released, their journey of healing will just begin. Why? Because trauma is what's left in you. And without a shadow of a doubt, these children and teachers and the head teacher would come out with some level of trauma. But I am grateful that they have been released. And I am grateful to those who worked tireless to secure their release. So thank you to all those people who were involved. I tied my scarf. I did my scarf campaign. I spoke almost every day for a month. And at some point, it really affected me because I had the names, I could visualize the children, and it was getting very, very deep in me. But I consistently did what I needed to do, and I'm just grateful they are alive. So understanding that impact of trauma, long-lived trauma, it just gave me something where I thought about consistently. It actually reminded me why I do what I do and why I have to keep hammering on that children deserve safety first in their homes. Yeah? Survivors deserve to be believed, and families deserve the support when something has happened in their families. And most of all, communities deserve the knowledge to understand, to have empathy towards those who have undergone the most horrific things, or actually what people call small t trauma. So you could have gone through trauma which doesn't seem like, oh, I've not got trauma, sorry, Toyin, for yours. No. When we sit down and talk, you realize that most people have undergone trauma. Why? Because those small t's, a lot of them accumulated, excuse me, they become one big T. So you might just be one where your mom or your dad or your family or teacher would say, oh my gosh, you don't even know anything. You start to what? Undermine your own intelligence. When people undermine you, you undermine yourself. And that becomes what? A traumatic event. When you want to go for a position, you'll only be going for those that are little. When your child wants to do a game, you'll say, oh my gosh, don't jump there. You make them be very fearful. So trauma can come in different shapes and sizes. It influences our behavior, our health. Now that will be coming up in one of my topics in the coming weeks. I will tell you how trauma affects us health wise. I know it's becoming quite common knowledge now, but I want to ingrain it in you because I've been talking about this since like 2019, just before the pandemic hit, and now it's becoming common narrative, which I'm very grateful for. It affects our relationships, leadership, and culture when we don't heal from our traumatic events. And one of the privileges I've recently had was speaking in my organization about psychological safety. Like, I presented this, I actually got an award, I'm pleased to say, because I asked whether the organization had created a space where people can speak up and not be reprimanded. And that is true when you have an attachment style that is insecure. That again, I will park because I'll be talking about attachment styles, securely attached and insecurely attached, and how it affects our every moment in our organizations, how it reinforces our behavior over the years. It's that same nervous system that carries childhood trauma that also influences how we lead, communicate, make decisions, and respond under pressure. You know, when a lot of people call off sick sometimes, I would say it's actually your nervous system saying, I can't deal. So, in other words, healing isn't only personal, it has organizational and societal implications too. So, over the coming weeks, we're going to explore some important topics together. We'll talk about childhood sexual abuse and healing. I am not shying away from that. That's my forte, absolutely. We'll talk about the neuroscience of trauma. We'll talk about the nervous system and why recovery isn't linear. In other words, you go back and forth and you show yourself compassion. We'll talk about faith, psychology, and compassion. And I will what? I will make sure you have the practical tools that support healing. And we'll talk about what parents, teachers, professionals, and leaders need to understand. So whether you're a survivor, you're someone who loves a survivor, in a relationship with a survivor, know someone who has some symptoms of what I might have said today, this is for you. So it might just be someone who just wants to understand trauma more deeply. Because guess what? If you are working with people who have got trauma, you need to know signs so you can understand how to navigate, but also how to understand people. Because why? When you're working with people, most times during the day, than you stay at home, it's vital that we get along. And when you understand people's story, I truly believe that we will get along a lot better. So I started this channel because I believed something then, and I believe it more strongly today. And that is that silence protects the wrong things. Yes, silence protects the wrong things. And healing begins when truth meets safety. That's very true for me and those of the people that I've been walking with and working with over the years. So today I choose courage over silence. At work I speak up, and I am actually not afraid to lose my job more than I am afraid to lose myself. And you might think, whoa, you've not got bills to pay. I have. And I'll tell you a secret. People actually prefer when you speak up. They trust you more. And that's what I've had. Imagine I've had 2 awards in the past 2 months. That's because I spoke up. But we often feel that when we are repressing our emotions, people will like us more. No, 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 no. When you speak up for what you believe in, as long as it's done in the right way, you are more respected. And those who are fearful of your courage, they're the ones that have the problem. So if you've been waiting for someone to say, speak, it's time for you to begin, consider this your invitation, because it won't do you any good staying quiet. Your nervous system will get compromised. Your immune system will. So thank you for waiting for me to come back to you. Thank you for continuing this journey with me. And I'm Toyin Okanuga. I'm back, and this conversation matters more than ever today. So if this video resonated with you, please subscribe, share it with someone who may need it, and leave a comment. I'd love to know what part of your healing journey you're on. Because why? Together we'll continue building a community where survivors are heard, healing is understood, and hope is always possible. And remember, your inner child, it has a voice. Don't suppress it. Let it roar. And how are you going to roar? You're going to roar through art, through music, dancing, expressing yourself, healing those wounds that once affected you deep down in your soul. Yes, I've put a link or two down where you can enroll on my biology of becoming so that you can get your voice back. So that even the AI that we're talking about will not even scare you. Because why? I equip you with what is to come. I love you loads. Bye for now.